Mr. Vice President, Madam High Commissioner, the High Commissioner's report emanates from HRC Resolution 22/1, which is rejected by Sri Lanka. The High Commissioner's request to establish an international inquiry mechanism to further investigate alleged violations also exceeds the mandate granted by Resolution 22/1. The trajectory that has emerged with regard to this recommendation reflects the preconceived, politicized and prejudicial agenda which has been relentlessly pursued with regard to Sri Lanka. Since following the defeat of terrorism in Sri Lanka on 26th May 2009, the High Commissioner in the first instance called for an independent and credible international investigation, which was subsequently repeated at regular intervals. The government of Sri Lanka therefore reiterates its categorical rejection of the conclusions and recommendations contained in the High Commissioner's report, which reflects bias and is tantamount to the unwarranted interference in the internal affairs of a sovereign state. Mr. Vice President, my delegation is surprised by the numerous errors and misperceptions contained in the draft report of Sri Lanka, despite the High Commissioner and her team having undertaken a comprehensive week-long visit to the country, and that the OHCHR had close to 5 months to verify facts in compiling the said report. Our comments on the draft report have drawn attention to the fact that the High Commissioner has raised concerns regarding a range of issues based on information of questionable veracity and conclusions arrived in a selective and arbitrary manner, including the extensive reference to the discredited panel of experts report on Sri Lanka, as well as the misplaced attention paid to the Secretary General's internal review panel report on Sri Lanka in the High Commissioner's annual report to the Council. Additionally, over 30 instances of specific factual errors and misperceptions contained in the High Commissioner's draft report have been corrected based on specific material that Sri Lanka has provided in its comments in relation to demobilization and disarmament, government's communication with special procedures, reduction of military presence, allegation of land, methods of NGO registration, sexual harassment, the Valivaria incident, transfer of a magistrate in Matale, allegations of non-implementation and partial implementation of recommends of LTLRC, and the video footage aired on Channel 4. Further, despite the report's assertion that the government of Sri Lanka has not responded to offers of technical assistance from the OHCHR, Sri Lanka has informed the Council that it remains open to consideration of technical cooperation from the OHCHR in some areas in reconciliation in line with the needs of the country. We are deeply concerned that such glaring erroneous information was included in a report of this nature, which leads us to question the OHCHR's sources as well as its motivations. It is also further a matter of concern that the OHCHR refused to accede to Sri Lanka's request to publish as an addendum to the report, as done the comments of Sri Lanka on the High Commissioner's draft, which demonstrated the many anomalies referred to above, thus disregarding established precedent, seriously impeding the visibility and integrity of the subject between the two documents. Mr. Vice President, in keeping with Sri Lanka's consistent policy of continuing engagement and further to the update provided by the Minister of External Affairs during the high-level segment, the following steps have been taken. An interim report on the census in the North and East has been made public earlier this month. The letter of agreement between the Government of Sri Lanka and the UN Humanitarian Country Team on the joint needs assessment, also recommended by the Special Rapporteur on IDPs during his visit, was signed earlier this week. The Witness and Victim Protection Bill is envisaged to be submitted to the Parliament by the first half of April this year. The Commission on Disappearance has now been extended to cover the period from 1983 due to several requests by aggrieved parties. In pursuance of our engagement with the special procedure mandate holders, since our statement to the high-level segment, we have also bilaterally engaged with SR on freedom of religion or belief and the independent expert on minority issues. GOSL will also seek to proceed with a procedure request for a visit by the Working Group on Disappearances, which we have had continued proactive engagement with following the conclusion of the work of the Commission on Disappearers. as the findings of the latter could have some correlation with that of the working group. Sri Lanka also continues to maintain vigilance in the face of credible evidence on the resurgence of terrorist activities by the LTTE. In particular, recent incidents in Kilinochchi, which led to the recovery of an arms cache, evidence on attempts to reorganize the terrorist outfit, and a shooting incident involving a former terrorist cadre, and further reaffirms our concerns. Investigations have confirmed that these activities were coordinated by a broader network of LTT operatives functioning from overseas. Mr. Vice President, despite these measures, at the behest of vested interests that some sections of the international community continue to unnecessarily characterize the government's efforts as being of little significance and distinct from reconciliation. There are also attempts to portray Sri Lanka as a country in which human rights violations are ongoing and new demands are for concrete action into allegations being leveled on a range of issues, many which are vague, broad and sweeping, and lack a degree of specificity or evidence that would allow the government to respond in a comprehensive manner. In conclusion, Mr. Vice President, it is in the light of this misplaced attitude that we are neither able to comprehend nor agree to the action in this Council which fails to acknowledge, let alone appreciate, the consolidation of peace and the very tangible progress Sri Lanka has made in reconciliation. Regrettably, instead, the Council continues to pay disproportionate attention to Sri Lanka, spearheaded by political motivations. Rather than encourage and support the ongoing reconciliation process in Sri Lanka, as well as the constructive engagement Sri Lanka continues to maintain with this Council, it is ironic that the draft resolution on Sri Lanka being mooted by some members of this Council is reflected of the same partisan agenda in its request to the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights to undertake a comprehensive independent investigation. Assistance to this progress by third-party experts whose mandate and credentials are far from clear, and its deliberate exclusion of a significant part of the duration of the terrorist conflict from the period under investigation via the introduction of particular time frames would be both precedent-setting and prejudicial of the interests of all member and observer states of this Council in future. Sri Lanka has consistently, with good reason, rejected previous resolutions on Sri Lanka proposed by the US, which have emanated from a politicized process and mandate, and without the consent of the country concerned. We would do so again. Sri Lanka reiterates that any action taken in the promotion and protection of human rights of a country must have the consent of that country. Politicized processes will only impede the delicate balance of the ongoing reconciliation process in Sri Lanka, as well as the constructive engagement Sri Lanka has continued to maintain with this Council. I thank you.